think we'll go ahead and get started. Just want to welcome everybody to this webinar. Thank you for joining. My name is Cynthia LaBella, and I'm the chair of the Practice and Policy Committee for AMSSM. And we do this webinar every year in January, and we kind of tweak it a little bit each year to update people on what we're doing in the committee, what we kind of our examples of our accomplishments over the last year, talk about what is coming down the pike and some of our agenda items for this year. But the main thing we want to do in this webinar is to welcome people to participate and provide a little bit of training as far as connecting with senators, congressmen, and talking about issues important to AMSSM. So I'll kind of introduce what we've accomplished over the course of the year, and then we'll hand it off to some of our other subcommittee leaders to talk about the rest of the topics. So again, welcome, and we'll just go ahead and get started. So some of the examples of things that our committee has worked on in 2022, National Conference of State Legislatures. I'll give you a little more details on that, and the current status of our state licensure exemptions. And then we also updated the scope of practice. So next slide. So here we are, Brian and I, and Jim was there with us too at the National Conference of State Legislatures this year, which takes place every year during August. And it's interesting because we get to be exhibitors at this rather than attendees. The attendees are the Congress folks and from all the different states. And so we met over 100 attendees at our booth. They stopped by. We were there to talk about all the issues important to sports medicine physicians. And one of the things that we talked about and are still working on, if you can go to the next slide, Brian, is this licensure exemptions for traveling physicians. So each state is so far, most of the states have passed state law allowing traveling physicians to practice medicine in their state for that temporary time that they are traveling with their team. We're still working on 4 of these states to pass that law in their area. And so one of the things that we do at this conference is talk to legislators in these states, Hawaii, Kansas, Nebraska, and Oklahoma. And if my memory serves me correctly, we were able to connect with a couple of people from Oklahoma and Nebraska to get the bug in their ear about this. And it's great because you can shake hands and speak to these folks and they identify with our issues. And it's a nice opportunity to make those connections. And I think we're making progress, and hopefully next year at this update, we might be able to have a few of those red states turn into blue. All right, next. Another thing that we did this year was we updated the sports medicine physician scope of practice. And this is a fairly lengthy and comprehensive document that we have posted on our website, as well as in our under the advocacy tab and in our handbook. The board of directors reviewed this as well and approved it. And this really comes in handy when we're talking to legislatures, because if there's something that's covering an area of what sports medicine physicians do in our scope of practice, and we can pull this out and show them what our qualifications are and what our areas of expertise and what we are expected to do in practice. And especially helpful when there things come up about reimbursement, for instance. And so you can access this, and I think Brian's going to share the link to the advocacy area on our website, so you can review the full scope of practice. All right, next slide. Okay, so those are some highlights from 2022. I'm going to pass this over to Sam Dixit, who's our vice chair for the Practice and Policy Committee. He also is a subcommittee lead for our legislative subcommittee. And so he's going to take it from here and talk about some of the things that are on the docket for 2023.
Great. Thanks, Cynthia. And thanks to Cynthia for her leadership on this committee, and to, of course, Brian Williams for all his support. So we're going to talk about what we're planning for 2023. Next slide. The way we approach this is we break it down into 3 tiers. We break our priorities into tiers. And I think the first thing I want to say off the bat is this isn't a ranking system that tier 3 things are not important to us. It's just that we feel that tier 1 issues are the high priority issues where we want to be taking the lead role in kind of chiming in on the legislation pertinent to these issues. A lot of it is related to our team physician roles. So the traveling team physician, which Cynthia alluded to, concussions, pre-participation physicals, emergency action plans, sudden cardiac arrest, opioids, restrictions on physician decision-making, AEDs, CPR and training in schools, athlete-patient treatment concerns, and player safety issues. Next slide, please. Tier 2 are important issues where we want to take an active role, but not at the level that we do with tier 1, obviously. So certified athletic training issues, including licensure for certified athletic trainer colleagues, drug testing, especially among student athletes. Tier 3 issues are important issues where we want to take AMSSM to take a supporting role. Examples include asthma, obesity, and physical activity. And of course, we think these are very important issues. We tend to work collaboratively with our colleagues from other organizations on discussing these issues with our legislators. Next slide, please. So, we've kind of looked through both what's happened in the past and sort of things that are brewing in the state legislatures to see, look for potential trends in legislation and policy. From a sudden cardiac arrest standpoint, obviously there's been a lot of recent high-profile media coverage given the events in Buffalo a couple of weeks ago, and there's already some sort of early legislation that we're kind of keeping our eyes on in various states. Emergency action plans, AEDs in schools, CPR and AED training for graduation, cardiac screening, and PPE physicals. Next slide, please. From a concussion standpoint, we've been looking at age limits for tackle football, return to learn protocols, expanding definition of healthcare provider for the purposes of concussion management. This has been going on for a few years, as many of you know, and we've been keeping an eye on that. Concussion registries and studies related to protective helmets or other gear and baseline testing. From an opioids and pain management standpoint, we've been looking at e-prescribing for opioids, treatments for opioid addiction, bills related to access to epinephrine administration and naloxone administration. And from a player safety issue, we keep an eye on legislation and policy directed towards heat illness, training for coaches and other staff, funding and availability for equipment, and abuse and violence against athletes.
So I'll take it over from here. So I just want to go over, I'm Brian Williams. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy here at AMSSM. And I wanted to go over just a few of the resources. All of these resources are available on our website. And so look there, and if you have any problems or trouble trying to find the resources, let me know. But we have a variety of issue briefs. We're trying to actually build out this library of issue briefs. But if you look at our website, you can find just one-page explanations of several of these issues. We write them, they're kind of geared towards policymakers, right? So the joke around Washington is if you want your member of Congress to understand an issue, you have to sort of write at the 7th grade level. So these are written at a basic level. They just kind of explain the issue, and then they explain AMSSM's position in a policy way. What kind of policy should be taken in terms of licensure across state lines, concussion, that sort of thing. Like I said, we're trying to build this out. We have a work group right now working on some really interesting writing on NIL, name, likeness, and image, and trying to get some policies in place for policymakers so that they understand where AMSSM's coming from, what our perspective is on different things. So check out those issue briefs. They're terrific handouts. If you have a meeting, they're great to leave behind, and they're easy to email. They come in PDF form. They're linked obviously on our website, so you can just send a link to your policymakers, and that gives them access to that. We also have here the state legislative handbook. This was just recently updated. We update it every week, or not every week. We update it every year, and We just published it this week, and if I can, as soon as I'm done, I'll put a link in the chat so that you can link to it and look through it. It is, if I do say myself, a pretty good comprehensive nuts to bolts explanation of what advocacy is. And so it may be kind of rudimentary for some of you, but if you're just getting into advocacy and you want to kind of have a handbook that describes on everything from how a bill becomes a law all the way to how to do grassroots, how to do a lobby day on the Hill, how to have a meeting with your legislator, links that will take you to your own state's legislative page, has everything in this handbook. We tried to make it a one-stop shop, and it's also a PDF that you can download. You can have it on your smartphone or whatever and carry with you. If you're old school, you could even print it out, I suppose. But it's all right there, and we encourage you to take a look at that. Like I said, when I'm done, I'll get a link put up in the chat. One of the things that you should also maybe bookmark is the state legislation tracking map. So on my end, one of the things Jim has asked me to do is to kind of keep track of what's going on in the states. And so we subscribe to a software program, and you can put in some keywords, and that keyword recipe sort of brings back every day. There's an email that comes to me and shows me what's going on in the states, and I'm able to read through those and scan it. And if it's something that falls on one of the tiers that Sam talked about, that Dr. Dixit talked about, if it falls on one of those tiers, then we put it up on the map. Okay, so as the state legislatures convene and start to work on things, come back to the map from time to time and look at your state, and you'll be able to see what issues we're tracking. And let me just say, if there's something that you hear about from your state medical society or from your specialty society that is not on our map that we should be aware of, because for whatever reason, maybe our keyword search didn't quite get the keyword correct, or we missed a bill, just reach out to me, and we can find that piece of legislation and get it up on the map. And that helps keep us in the know, helps keeps us informed, and all the members informed of what's going on in the states. We also have these brochures. There's several brochures, and each brochure has a different audience. One of the brochures, the blue one there, is specifically written for legislators and staff. And you can print these out, and the way the brochure works, right, it's a little trifold, and it'll print out, if you print up double-sided, and you can fold these things up yourself. They're very handy. Or if you need me to send you a couple, let me know, and we can see what we can do. But they're very good. Again, leave behinds, they're good to hand out. Or if you have a table or something that you're doing at a lobby day, they're good to have there on the table for legislators and staff. I'm going to turn it back over to Cynthia. She wants to do some more introductions.
Thanks, Brian. That's very helpful. And as you were talking, Sam Dixit was entering into the chat links to all of the things you were mentioning. So hopefully people can link on those and take advantage of that. So you already heard from me. I'm the chair of the committee, and also Sam Dixit, who's the vice chair. We have 4 subcommittees in our under our umbrella at Practice and Policy. Luis Rodriguez, who's here on the call and on the webinar right now, he leads the Healthcare Transformation Subcommittee. Michael Swartzen leads the Practice and Economics Subcommittee. Alex Diamond, who's here with us tonight, also leads the Advocacy Subcommittee. And then we have Sonia Ruparell, who is a past fellow liaison to our committee, who stayed on to help us out with a number of initiatives, one of which is the key contacts and meeting the new representatives from Congress. So you'll hear from her a little bit later, as well as Brook Pfister, who's our current fellow liaison. And then, of course, Jim Griffith, our executive director for AMSSM, and you already met Brian Williams. So I can hand it off. I know that we have Alex Diamond on the webinar now, and I'll let him kind of talk a little bit about his role. But I think he's, and you heard from Sam, but I think we've got Luis and Michael not able to join us today. So Alex, if you're there, do you want to give a little bit of a summary?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Cynthia. So I think from our subcommittee, I think one of the big things that we do is try to support the overall aims of AMSSM and the board of directors. And so as there are initiatives that come down, our job is to sort of look and see, okay, is there community advocacy aspect that we can add to this initiative to help move it forward, help get it into the community, help grow it. And so that's sort of what we do. And so some of the examples are the youth sports advocacy task force. So we did a lot of work with that. You can go on the AMSSM website to check that out. Another one was preventing sexual violence in sport. Was another big one, again, from the board that we supported with several initiatives. And I think, and then we have other individual things that we are trying to do as a group to, again, grow our efforts in regards to community advocacy. And one is what Brook, who Cynthia mentions, our fellow this year, who's doing an awesome job with developing a high school toolkit. So, this is one of the big questions that comes up every year, particularly from our younger members or our members in training. How do we get involved? Once I'm involved, what are some of the speed bumps and other things to try to navigate? And so what we're trying to work on is to have all that in one place to help people year after year to be able to access that information easily. And then certainly also sponsoring the Community Advocacy Award for AMSSM that's presented every year annually at the meeting. And so there are every year really impressed with the submissions that come in, but I think even more so on top of that, that helps to spread what other members are doing and not always having to reinvent the wheel. You can sort of see what someone else is doing across the country, and maybe that's something that you can do in your home area. And then periodically we'll do a breakout session or small group session at the annual meeting, directing on some advocacy efforts and or highlighting some of the key projects that other folks do. I'd probably say that's a brief synopsis, Cynthia.
Perfect. Thank you. I was going to mention too, for everyone on this webinar who's listening in, if you are a member of the Practice and Policy Committee, you should have received an introductory email several weeks ago from one or more of us, depending on how many subcommittees you selected to be part of, kind of introducing what we've got going on in each area. And also all of our email addresses are in there. So if you ever need to contact us about anything, that's a good resource. If you are not yet a member of the Practice and Policy Committee and are interested in joining, please join. And then you'll have access to all these connections as well. So I think the next slide takes us to the Welcome to Congress meetings. All right. And I think I'm going to pass this over to Brian and Brook and Sonia, correct?
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Brook Pfister. I'm the current fellow liaison, and we'll be going through the next couple of slides with the support of Sonia Ruparell as well as Brian. I'm very excited to share about this initiative that initially took place 2 years ago, which Sonia spearheaded, but it is a series of hopefully Zoom meetings where we're going to get a group of AMSSM members to introduce themselves to newly elected congressmen or women. So the idea is that there are staff, every kind of congressman or woman usually has a staff member who is kind of their go-to person to deal with more healthcare related bills and issues that come up. And our goal is to introduce some AMSSM members to those healthcare staffers to share about the mission of AMSSM, and then also just to make that initial contact so that as things come up over the next several years that they're in office, they have us as a contact and know that this is an organization that they can turn to as questions come up related to sports medicine, and particularly those tier 1 issues that Sam Dixit reviewed earlier on in this presentation. The goal we're hoping to still do this virtually via Zoom to try and incorporate as many members as we can participating in it. And While the time varies a little bit, I know the goal is kind of a 15 to 20-minute conversation with this group of people, as well as incorporating the members who volunteer, and Brian will be present at all meetings. Our hope is that the meetings will begin in the beginning of February and kind of extend over a 6 to 8 week period, but it really depends on how we're able to schedule those. And while all are welcome to join, so if you're on this call or you're watching this at a future date and you're interested in participating, we would be so excited to have you. We do want to especially encourage trainees, so fellows, residents, and medical students to participate, as this is a great opportunity for early exposure to advocacy within sports medicine. The kind of way it would work is again, you can see at the bottom, if you're interested in participating and you want more information about this, and potentially to be a part of this effort, then you can actually use the QR code before to fill out, just answer a couple of quick questions, including your name, your email, and the state where you live and work. The idea with that is that we can then kind of pair you with the congressperson from your state. The idea being is that we know any legislator is going to have kind of the priority of addressing their constituents and the interests of their constituents. And so by having you as someone who works and lives in that state, you would be kind of the representative and connection to that specific person. Furthermore, you're going to have Brian present. So if you are worried that you're not an expert in all of the bills that were mentioned previously or all of the issues, that's okay. I think this is actually a great opportunity because it's more of an introductory meeting. You're talking about what AMSSM is, what your career and profession looks like as someone interested and involved in sports medicine, and then making that connection for future conversations. And if they do have specific questions about either legislation that has come up between now and the meeting, you'll have Brian present, and if he's able to answer the question, great. Otherwise, it's a great opportunity to practice the advocacy skill of letting them know that you'll look into it more and get back to them with additional information. So if you're interested in this, we would really love as many people to participate as are interested, and you can again use the QR code below to submit any additional information. And then we can go to the next slide. So for the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about tips for success just in general when you're having a meeting with one of your legislators, and then Brian's going to move on to talk specifically about being a key legislative key contact within AMSSM, what that entails, and how you can kind of prepare yourself for that amazing opportunity. But in general, when you're approaching a conversation either with a staffer or with a legislator themselves, this is a general outline of things you could be thinking about, but you want to approach it by educating. So first and foremost, making small talk, building trust. I think a great example. I think next you want to find out what their baseline understanding is of the issue that you're passionate about and bringing to their attention. And you want to always have kind of an ask and be a little bit concise when you start the conversation with the legislator or staffer, kind of coming in and introducing yourself and all of that, but saying that I'm really interested in talking to you today because there's an important issue, citing the relevant legislation, and asking the representative or their staffer to be able to either support that or kind of push something forward. I think one area where you are an expert, even if you don't have a ton of experience in advocacy, is by providing examples. So if you have a patient experience or patient story that kind of demonstrates the importance of a specific bill or law, then this is a time to kind of give, again, a concise example of that patient story. Even better, we were talking as a group, a practice and policy group, about strategies for discussions like this, and it can be even better to bring someone in person. So a patient or a family member who have been kind of directly affected by this type of legislation, because it's a lot easier for a legislator, for any human, to be able to kind of put a face and a story to an issue. So that's a great kind of strategy and way to approach it if you have the ability to do so. And then utilizing your resources. So we have, just like Brian showed us before, we have issue briefs that AMSSM has created. There are a lot of other kind of pre-made handouts. So making sure before you go into a meeting that you're really taking advantage of all of the resources that AMSSM and a lot of our other kind of primary specialty organizations are able to offer. So then there's the ask. So that could be both asking in the sense of you want them to support a certain bill, but also asking if they have any hesitations or things that they'd like to discuss more prior to you leaving, or that they would like you to kind of look into and then get back to them. And then following up is really important. So after you make this connection, whether it's in Welcome to Congress or whether you are reaching out on behalf of specific legislation, it's really important after that meeting to follow up and check in, thank them again for the time that they took to speak with you. And again, often leaving something with them in kind of either it's paper if you're there in person, or when you send that follow-up email, you attach kind of one of the issue briefs or handouts that are relevant to the legislation that you've discussed. I think that that can be really helpful. And then as concerns arise throughout this whole process, taking the time to kind of step back, use your resources, and follow up and resolve those concerns. Brian or Sonia, anything to add in terms of this slide?
I think that was a great overview, Brooke. I think that was terrific. So the thing is, this is a 15 to 20 minute meeting. So think about that for just a second. If you go through your head what a 15-minute meeting looks like, you're not going to get through all of this. But that's, I think Brooke kind of emphasized that. That's where the follow-up is. And with email and texting and so forth, the follow-up is as easy now as it ever has been. And so it's just a matter of building that relationship and making sure that we're always following up, right? And making, because we're in the Welcome to Congress meetings, we don't really have an ask per se, right? But later on we might want them to sign a letter or co-sponsor a bill or something. So we're trying to get them to say yes to something, or maybe it's something we're trying to get them to say no to something. But either way, we're trying to get to some objective. And so you just keep following up, keep answering questions, resolving concerns until we finally get to the yes or whatever objective we're trying to get to. And sometimes, frankly, that can take years. As Cynthia pointed out, that the clarification of the physician licensure across state lines, we've been working on that for many years, and we've just been going through this flow chart. You know, we ask, we follow up, we resolve concerns, we keep educating, and we keep doing it. So, Sonia, did you have anything to add?
No, I think that was I just want to underscore what Brooke said. Brian is at every single meeting. So for anyone on the call that doesn't have exposure to advocacy, this is a great introduction and a really good program. So thanks, Brooke, for giving such a good summary of that.
I'm like that safety blanket. If you ever watched, Charlie Brown and the Peanuts, I'm Linus's safety blanket. So you're okay. And these Welcome to Congress meetings, actually, they are very friendly meetings, right? So they're brand new staffers. They're just getting involved with a new member of Congress that was just elected. They're all brand new. They all want to succeed. Everybody up there wants to be successful, and so they got elected on a platform. Maybe it had to do with building a highway or agriculture or something, right? The likelihood of it having had, their campaign, that sports medicine entered into their campaign at all, is probably very slim, and so they probably don't know a lot about sports medicine. So a group like AMSSM knocks on the door and says, "We'd like to welcome you to Congress. Do you have 15 or 20 minutes?" They jump on that. They kind of are eager to meet with somebody like us because they want to know more about it. They need resources. They need to build a network, if you will, of experts, and we would be part of that expert, so that we those meetings generally are pretty friendly, and they're good meetings. I think those of you that can sign up for it, we would really appreciate that. And look forward to working with you on those meetings. So let me just run through. I won't spend a lot of time on this. This next slide or two are specifically for state key contacts, and several of you have signed up specifically to be the key contact. You're the one that we reach out to if there's something going on in your state. And over the years, and even just over the last couple of days, I've reached out to many of you as several of the state legislatures have kind of come online. We've started to see different hearings happening and different things happening. So we reach out to you as a state key contact, as the go-to person to kind of help us understand what's going on, or to write a letter, or to reach out to a state legislature. So I'm just going to go through these, and we are going to post these slides, and this whole thing is recorded, so we can always go back and look at this. But we've talked about a couple of these, but the first thing there is just keep a bookmark, or however it is that you check the internet. Check back every once in a while, check the state legislation tracking map, kind of see what's going on in your state. I'm sure that your state medical societies have something similar. Just kind of be aware of what's going on. Sign up for all of those advocacy activities, newsletters, that sort of thing. Please be proactive in that. I think that networking is how we gain a lot of information, how we do a lot of advocacy. Same in the next bullet point there is just to tap into some of the school and athlete associations, the medical societies and so forth, and participate in those state and local activities. Also, this is very important, reach out to some non-physician partners. Obviously, our practices or wherever you're working will have maybe a team. You'll have the athletic trainers, physical therapists, maybe some school administrators, obviously parents. So try to form your network, not just to include physicians and the specialty that you practice in, but to include kind of that outer ring of people that are also involved in the care that you provide, right? So as you reach out to your ATs or to other members of your team, you'll start to see that their professional organizations are also bringing up issues that have an impact on sports medicine policy. So that's a good way to also be involved. And then just find out, politics is very personal. It's about personal relationships. I think you picked up on that when Dr. Pfister was going through her slide about the educated. She called it small talk, and that's really what it is. But isn't that what we do as human beings? We do a small talk, and that's how we develop a relationship. We start to build trust in each other. And so if you find out who's on your state medical board and kind of find out who the individuals are and kind of reach out and get to know them, that's a good way to build those relationships. And then when it comes time, you'll be able to reach out to them on the phone or in an email and have a relationship that's already built up. Here's just a few more. Build a network or a list of just other sports medicine physicians that are interested in advocacy. That comes in handy because you can team up to do different things. Just sharing news articles is very helpful, but also if it comes time to sending out an email, even if there's just 2 or 3 of you, even better if there's 5 or 10, it sends a message. When 10 emails are received, when a policymaker receives 10 emails from 10 sports medicine physicians about a certain topic, it will raise their awareness, and they'll start to realize that this is an issue that they need to pay attention to. So that building that network, and network might be too sophisticated of a word for it. It's just basically having other colleagues that you can reach out to and share information with and rely on. Same sort of thing, the next one about finding, everybody has a little bit of a different skill set. So as you build this society or this network of other physicians, just one of you can divide up the labor a little bit. One can keep the list, one can send the emails, one can organize an advocacy day. Maybe there's one of you that's really good at public speaking. They can be the one if there's ever an opportunity to testify at a hearing. That's what I'm saying is as you build out this network, you'll have a variety of resources available to you in the terms of different skill sets. Double check every once in a while the advocacy website. I put the path there. If you go to the home page, there's a menu, and you go under there to advocacy, and there's a bunch of things under there. And we are updating and working on that pretty frequently. There's obviously a lot of advocacy tools that we've talked about, but there's some other things as well just that fall under the Practice and Policy Committee umbrella. So take a look there. There's resources there available to you. And if there's something that's not there that needs to be there, you can just send an email to me or to Dr. LaBella, and we can bring it up with the committee and see if we can add that to the advocacy website. The next one is organize. Okay, so advocacy days are interesting, and I know a lot of you have participated in advocacy days. You've told me just through your medical society a lot of times, or one of your other professional associations. Maybe it's a white coat day where you where all the physicians wear a white coat and their stethoscope and go up to the hill. Those are kind of neat. And as far as I know, we've never really had one specific to sports medicine. But if you're interested in doing something like that, you can take a look in the legislative handbook that I talked about, and there's a page or two in there that describe how to put together sort of a little advocacy day, which would include a visit, or it doesn't even have to include a visit. It could just be on the same day. Maybe you gather a bunch of sports medicine physicians to send an email on a bill or on a hearing or on whatever the topic is. But the organization of it is important. It brings to bear kind of the power, right? The numbers and the force, I suppose, of a bunch of people chiming in on exactly the same topic at exactly the same time. That has power. And then finally, don't forget to attend the annual Practice and Policy Committee meeting. I obviously didn't update that slide. I just noticed that right now. That's in Phoenix, not in Atlanta. Don't go to Atlanta, go to Phoenix. But the Advocacy and the Practice and Policy Committee meeting that we have there, we have a really terrific opportunity to do a lot of networking and to have all of us kind of together at the same time and compare notes and share success stories and share best practices is what we've been seeing going on in some of your states. Let me just conclude with a couple of just other quick tips for success, okay? Lawmakers, policymakers, they generally have a shallow knowledge about a lot of different topics. That's sort of how they got elected, and they can go to a voter and they can talk about almost any topic, but they're sort of an inch deep, right? So they don't really know a lot about it. They know a little, they know just enough to maybe get elected. But you in this case, you're the subject matter expert. You're the one that knows what it's like to be a physician, and specifically a sports medicine physician. So you don't have to be shy, right? So they're really relying on you. You're educating these policymakers who, again, they want to succeed. They want to succeed, and they need to kind of know what you know in order to make an educated and informed decision on a piece of legislation, right? So don't be shy. You're the subject matter expert. But that said, if there's something that you don't know, if they bring up a topic that you don't know or that you're not comfortable talking about, just say that. Say you don't know, or you'll find out, you'll get back to them. You don't have to be an expert in all things, right? We're just representing sports medicine policy here. And if something comes up that isn't within that realm or that you're just unfamiliar with, it's okay to just say, I don't know what that is all about, but I'll find out and get back to you. We've kind of mentioned this before, but lean on those AMSSM issue briefs and other, evidence-based documented sources. That's what we're a science-based, documented, evidence-based organization. So just always rely on things that you can point to, which includes personal experience. I don't want to say that it has to be published in a scientific journal or anything, but if you've seen something in your practice or in your experience, that is evidence in its own right. And so bring up your own personal experiences and rely on that as well. We focus at AMSSM, we just focus on tier 1, 2, and 3 issues. If something is not on that list, it doesn't mean that it's not important, but there's probably other organizations that do it better than AMSSM. So if you're going to go up to the hill on an issue that AMSSM, it's not really a tier 1, 2, or 3 issue, then we don't really have a lot of support materials there. So if there's something that needs to be on that tier 1, 2, or 3 list, you can reach out to Dr. LaBella or me, and we talk about this from time to time on what to focus on. But we just try to keep it to sports medicine, specific sports medicine policy. That's what we're good at, right? And that's what you're good at. Okay. Now, one thing we want to make sure that you understand is there's opportunities. There's these hearings that come up on different pieces of legislation, and there's opportunities to submit written testimony, or from time to time to go to the legislature and offer oral testimony. Give a talk about a specific bill. So look for those opportunities, and they're all over the place. A lot of times when you meet with a policymaker, they will write your name down or take your contact information and then call you in a month or two when a hearing comes up. So those are good opportunities to offer expert support during a congressional hearing or a legislative hearing. That kind of gets to the next one. Always provide your contact information so that they can get a hold of you. And then always, always, always just ask if you need any help. We're here to help you. Dr. LaBella, Dr. Dixit, all of us, me included. Call me anytime. My email was on an earlier slide, and I think it'll be up here in just a minute. Write that down, and you can reach out anytime, and we'll provide help if you need it. I'm going to kick it back to Dr. LaBella and go into some Q&A.
Thank you, Brian. As always, just such helpful information. All your experience just is wonderful, and I just encourage folks to, again, as Brian said, reach out with questions. But I think we can. One thing I want to mention before we open it up to questions and comments and discussion is that a few times, and Brian did a nice job summarizing the fact that we have these resources, one of which is the issue briefs. One of our goals is to continue expanding our library of issue briefs so that we have them at the ready when these topics come up. Again, focusing on all those tiers and the different issues. So if you are interested in working on any of those things, writing issue briefs, again, is not that hard. As Brian said, they're really the basics of any of these topics. You're not doing a deep dive. You're just doing a surface summary for these policymakers. So please let us know. Shoot me an email, shoot Brian an email. Let us know you're interested. We'd love to have a team that we can put together to work on this. And then the other thing I was going to mention before we open it up is if you are on, say, your something at the state level, or the medical society in your city or your state, or it could be the high school athletic association. It's great if you could let us know what your role is and what state you're working with already, because sometimes these things come up and we say to ourselves, and we scratch our head, oh, who's on that committee for, I don't know, Indiana, or who's on that committee for Montana? And then if we have kind of a list at the ready, then we know we can go to that person and see what their thoughts are from that group regarding a specific piece of legislation. So that's kind of all I had to summarize, and I think we can open it up to questions or comments. Oh, great! So Jim put in there the where the meeting is. That's great. I can read from the chat, or if people want to unmute and ask a question, I think that's fine too. I don't know. I see in the chat bar you put about the one of the prominent issues, the education and screening for sudden cardiac arrest, and that several states have introduced some legislation. So maybe you could let us know what states, and if there's anyone on this webinar that's in that area, we could talk about that.
Yeah. So just we were talking about this before. Sam, Dr. Dixit mentioned it, but with the very public, occurrence on the field, right there on the football field, of a sudden cardiac arrest, which happened in front of all of America watching football. I think a lot of state policymakers and federal policymakers are responding to that. What do we need to do in terms of sudden cardiac arrest policy? So you'll see on the state legislative tracking map, there's already several states, maybe a dozen or so, that have introduced some sort of legislation regarding AED placement, CPR training, requirements for CPR training before they can graduate from high school, screenings, all kinds of things kind of related to this. And that is an interesting, from a political science point of view or an advocacy point of view, that's an interesting thing. So you have this very public thing that happened on television, and it has prompted everybody to go back and review their emergency action plans, all of that. And those are all issues that AMSSM care very deeply about, and that we have issue briefs, and we can speak as experts on all of those issues. And so check that map. And if there's something in your state, or if you want to just reach out to me. We can go look at that and just see if there's something happening in your state on that.
And I think I also want to highlight that while the majority of the focus of this webinar was on meeting with legislators and policy at that level, the other things that our umbrella practice and policy includes is issues related to practice. And Michael Swartzen, for instance, in his role as the leader for that subcommittee, there are a lot of questions we get about reimbursement for certain things that we do with various different insurance companies or through Medicare. And so we have a voice in that, right? And I think if these things are coming up in your private practice and there are certain things happening in your state with regard to reimbursement, we can be a team that works, at that level on your behalf. We've done a few things where we've written letters, for instance, to insurance companies about what the benefits and the qualifications for certain procedures that may not be getting reimbursed at the level that they should be. So keep in mind that it goes beyond policy, our committee. We do focus on practice issues as well.
Yeah, I think the other point I would make is that we also rely on the membership sometimes to help point us in the direction of some of these legislative things that are going on in their state. So, I mean, Brian has added a lot of sort of fancy tools to help us collate through the states and even the local legislation that's pending in some municipalities. But I think we still really rely on the membership for some things. And I think we can also in turn help when something has come up before elsewhere. We can help give our experience with those types of legislations in other municipalities or states.
One good example of that, I kind of alluded to it, but exactly what Dr. Dixit is talking about. One of the members, when AMSSM member reached out about a very concerning name, image, and likeness deal. You're all familiar with this, right? Where athletes have been, the Supreme Court ruled on this, that the athletes have control over their own name, image, and likeness. And so a business or a for-profit company can offer money to do different things. And so that's pretty neat for the athlete, but there was a very concerning health-related NIL deal going on, and the athlete was proceeding down this NIL deal, maybe contrary to the athlete's own health, right? So the AMSSM member reached out and said, do we have anything on this? And this is such a new area, we really didn't. And so Dr. LaBella and the whole team got together and said, we probably should put a work group together and write up some not necessarily guidance, it's an issue brief, right? So this is very basic. What is the issue around NIL and what does AMSSM recommend? And that work group is actually going on right now. Maybe there's some of the work group on this call right now, but that's exactly what Dr. Dixit is saying. If you see something going on that we need to be aware of, please bring it up, and it will just make AMSSM all the stronger if we can get a nice library of issue briefs and just hone in on some of those issues that affect sports medicine policy.
And Maria wrote in the chat a question about getting involved as a trainee. And I think that's a great question. And I would say the first most kind of pertinent right now would be participating in the Welcome to Congress meetings, if that's something that you're interested about. Again, I think it's a great opportunity as a trainee to get a little bit of exposure and to do so alongside Brian, an expert. Additionally, if you are a trainee and are interested in getting more involved, you are welcome to email me and we can talk about kind of your specific interests and if there are any projects we're currently working on where you might be able to help.
Thank you so much.
I don't see any other questions in the chat, but if there's anybody that wants to chime in, you can unmute and ask.
Cynthia, are we doing a I forget what they're called, the early morning presentations before the main.
Oh, yes, we do have an ICL that is a practice and policy ICL. I forget what day it's on, but that kind of falls under that practice category that Michael Swartzen's leading. We're going to talk about when you get denials from insurance companies for certain sports medicine procedures and how to appeal those denials and manage those. So, and how to bill for a lot of the procedures that get done in the sports medicine clinics. And so that's going to be the topic for the ICL.
So it's another opportunity to sort of hear some of the stuff that we do on the committee in a small group setting where you can be comfortable to ask a lot of questions, and I encourage you to attend that too.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks, Alex. And I think that advocacy spans such a broad array of things that are done, especially at the community level. And as Alex mentioned, we have this community advocacy award, and you know, all of us do a little bit for our community, and you may not think about it as award worthy, but any little thing you do is something that we would like to talk about and publicize and really advertise among our members and highlight and celebrate people who are doing this kind of work for their community. So no project is too small. Enter your name and your project into this the call for award candidates, and certainly you know, we have one winner, but we always highlight all of the projects in a newsletter or on our website, just to keep everybody in the loop what's going on. And it's a great opportunity to network, because somebody might read about your project who has something similar they're thinking of doing or did in the past or are currently doing but didn't submit, and then you get connected. So as I said, no project's too small. And if you think, I'm not sure if this is advocacy, send it to us, and you know, we'll look through it and we'll put it in the right place. Okay, I see a question in the chat. Are there any efforts focused on achieving health equity, given that this is one of the themes of this year's AMSSM conference? So that is true. We have the pre-conference, the research summit this year is going to be on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I would highly encourage you to attend that if you're interested in this topic. The planning committee's done an amazing job. And so that's a wonderful way. They're going to have a lot of breakout sessions, a lot of working groups as part of this. It's not just sit and listen. Part of it is sit and listen to people presenting, but I think the main goal here is to really get people talking about and strategizing and coming up with ideas to address this issue in the world of sports medicine. So those are my thoughts on that, but others may have. For instance, at the policy level, Brian, do you see anything coming up?
Yeah,
related to health equity?
Yeah, this is an emerging topic, right? So we are monitoring there's both federal and state things going on, and we're trying to our very best to monitor all of them. And as they touch on specific sports medicine policy, that's where we would get involved. Health equity is just such a broad topic. And to be perfectly frank, we don't have the bandwidth for that, right? And there are other organizations also, frankly, that maybe do it better than we would do it and just have more of a focus on that specific topic, whereas we are focused entirely on sports medicine specifically, right? So I don't know if that answers your question, but as we find a nexus between health equity and sports medicine, we will. And I don't know if there might be some strategic planning going in that direction, some other things that I think AMSSM will announce soon that will be of interest to you. So keep your ears open there. But hopefully that answers your question. I apologize, that's probably more vague than you wanted, but we're not really tracking any specific things. We're just kind of looking at it more generally and chiming in when it deals with sports medicine in particular.
Brian, one question I have along those lines, when I think of kind of health equity and the intersection of, sports medicine, I think about initiatives to make our communities more active. So legislation surrounding parks and walking paths and bike paths and things like that. Is AMSSM currently tracking any of that, legislation? Again, that's pretty broad, but that's sort of one thing I think about with health equity in sports and exercise medicine.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Sarah. So yes, absolutely. In fact, because there's a lot of other organizations that touch on physical activity, we do the sports medicine side of it, but there's dozens of organizations, and actually we've all banded together. About 2 years ago, we all got together and formed a coalition. It's called the Physical Activity Alliance, and it includes ACSM, National Athletic Trainers Association, the American Heart Association, and several other 14 or 15 other organizations, including us. And that's where we are looking at safe streets, pedestrian safety, parks and rec, youth sports, a bunch of different things to encourage physical activity in all aspects, modes of transportation, all of that. And the Physical Activity Alliance is doing great. And I try my very best to put updates in the advocacy corner on what the Physical Activity Alliance is doing, but they frankly are just constantly doing work on it. So if you want, we can talk offline if you're interested in some of the work they're doing, but it's really neat stuff. And AMSSM is a founding member, and we are an active contributor to the Physical Activity Alliance.
I think to also piggyback on the answer to the health equity question, while Brian kind of alluded to the bandwidth issue, we all sort of are very connected to our primary specialty organizations as well. I know Cynthia is a pediatrician and is very involved with AAP. I'm very involved. I'm an internist. I'm involved with the American College of Physicians, and those sort of primary specialty organizations all have sort of efforts in this realm, and they ask us to chime in not infrequently, and that's how we are involved.
Hey, Cynthia, I know we're running up on the time, but could you share just briefly about how our board has charged the sort of how they've charged us to take the research that we're doing as an organization through our CRN and be able to translate that through policy?
Sure. So folks probably know about the Collaborative Research Network that AMSSM has. That they do a number of things, one of which is to help young investigators get off the ground. They have smaller grants, they have larger grants. We just launched a mentorship program to help people get more training, more experience from mentors within AMSSM. And I think part of that goal for those mentorship grants is to get some have people learn about translation of the research findings into practice and policy. And so our committee is directly connected with CRN through the fact that I wear both hats, and we've got some other folks that, and Brian as well is on both. And so knowing what's coming out in terms of grant projects from the CRN, as well as the research committee and the abstracts that get presented at our annual meeting. One of the ideas we talked about at our last CRN meeting was having a team go through all the abstracts and look through what kind of information is new that our AMSSM members have been researching, and how does that match up with what's going on the Hill, right, or at your state, and how can we use that information to inform whether it's issue briefs or these meetings with congressmen and congresswomen. So we're looking for all these opportunities and ideas to translate the research that AMSSM members do directly into funnel into what our committee is working on. So the mentorship, the grants, and the abstracts are the three examples that come to mind. Jim, if I'm missing anything, you can fill in the blanks.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. I know we're kind of viewed as these different silos, but that's the greatest thing about the board of directors is that each of us as a board member chairs a different committee. And so that's how we all try to coordinate and collaborate and make sure, we're taking advantage of each other's expertise as well as the overlap that can be beneficial between committees. So I think we're at time. I just want to thank everyone for joining us. And for those of you viewing this after the fact, thank you for joining too. And we have contact information here. Again, feel free to reach out with anything, any questions. We're always available. And you can check us out on the Collaborate website too. We've got, after each of our leadership meetings that the chairs, we meet once a month to discuss topics. Brian shares the minutes of those meetings so you can keep abreast of what we've been talking about. So thanks again. Have a good evening, everyone. See you in Phoenix.
Thanks, everybody.